Shin Megami Tensei 5, or SMT 5, is probably my favorite Atlus RPG from a gameplay perspective. It's hard but not unfair, reasonably long but doesn't overstay its welcome, complex but not confusing. Genuinely, this game's approach to the gameplay elements is the pinnacle of what I love about not just Atlus RPGs, but JRPGs in general. Which is why it's so disappointing how nothing this game's narrative really is. There's next to no real character development for 90% of the cast. The lore is interesting, but nothing is really done with it in a meaningful way, and anything interesting is tucked away into side content rather than displayed directly to the player. Full spoilers ahead. SMT5, in many ways, feels like a direct response to people's criticisms of Persona 5. While many might scoff at a comparison to Persona in an SMT review, it is important context to consider. Persona 5 had been out for 5 years in Japan when SMT5 came out, so the company had plenty of time to make changes based on the things they heard. This doesn't even have to be in a negative light either. In some ways, SMT5's big open areas feel like a direct evolution of Persona 5's dungeon design. Both are linear, both have a set collection of enemies that changes as you get further in, both have multiple mini-bosses inside the area that culminates in a final boss. To my eyes, SMT5 feels like it actively tries to differentiate itself from Persona 5 in key ways. Most people who play Persona 5 won't have too hard a time getting through the game. SMT5 is the complete opposite. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and very often the player can find themselves in a situation where a battle is completely out of their control because of a small mistake. In this way, SMT5 really does feel like a response to the difficulty complaints a lot of people have with Persona 5's main narrative. Interestingly, I do tend to think that the second area has the most focused portion of the story, and it's the one that feels the most like it's riffing on Persona's tropes. A bullied schoolgirl, her friend who just wants to help, and the main protagonist, the only one truly capable of doing something. However, the dark twist on this story arc does end up feeling different enough to make it have its own weight and not just feel like a copy. Of course, even in this context, it still doesn't excuse the general underdevelopment of SMT5's narrative as a whole. SMT5's world and character design also strikes me as a response to Persona 5. Rather than lots of flamboyant, exaggerated characters that are meant to appeal to the player, SMT5 isn't afraid to be a little weird and off-putting. Yes, plenty of the demons have that waifu husbando appeal, especially the new editions, but just as many are creepy or just downright weird. Even the environments are different, with Persona going for a stylized, upbeat Tokyo, where SMT is downright bleak in comparison. Similarly, while Persona encourages investing in your party like a typical JRPG, SMT takes things in a direction that feels a bit less emotional, in a good way. If you want, you can bring a demon from the beginning of the game all the way to the end. It's a perfectly valid thing to do if you want to make the game harder for yourself. But the game all but encourages the player to discard their demons as soon as a better option is available. While this is an aspect that permeates quite a few Megami Tensei games, even Persona to some degree, the level to which the player just outright discards most demons, even the special ones eventually, could be an odd decision to people who play RPGs where their party doesn't change very much. Again, I bring these comparisons up only because it is important context when discussing any SMT game. I love both Persona 5 and SMT 5, and their similarities only help me appreciate the ways in which they are different even more. Something about SMT 5's level design just works. The way the Nahobino moves, the light platforming, the way you attack enemies to start a battle, everything just clicks. The exploration especially is incredibly satisfying. The game is split up into 4 main areas: The first is a relatively linear path that serves as a great introduction. The second is also linear, but also has some neat branching points that makes for great exploration. The third is, unfortunately, probably my least favorite, mostly because the gimmick is that there is a higher and lower level, and it makes exploring a bit too committal in most instances. I don't want to redo everything I just did for a chest, thank you very much. The final area is the most open of the bunch. You get a choice of what you want to do first, where you want to go first, everything. Personally, this is my favorite, not only because it nails the exploration elements, but also because the soundtrack is superb. Honestly, this section of the game is superb in general. While the narrative itself is lacking, I adore the characterization of the Norse and Greek gods, and while I'm less familiar with Hindu theology, I really enjoy that Vasuki acts as a representative of Shiva and teases the existence of Shiva as a superboss, giving the lore a sense of scale. What I'm less fond of is the primary antagonists of the game, those being Tsukuyomi, Abdiel, Nuwa, and their human counterparts Atsuta, Dazai, and Yakumo. Atsuta and Tsukuyomi are fine, I guess. Tsukuyomi comes off as something of an allegory to nationalism and believes that Japanese gods are best served to protect Japan. Atsuta has a sister that he needs to protect, which is fine and all, but after that he kind of just joins up with Tsukuyomi. Nothing else really happens. Dazai and Abdiel, as the law representatives, are actually a super interesting insight into zealotry, but the problem is all of the development happens way too fast. Dazai feels useless and looks up to Abdiel's sense of purpose in following God. For her part, Abdiel doesn't stray from the path despite numerous pieces of evidence to suggest that the creator is dead. However, at the end of their story, not only does Abdiel become a fallen angel to justify her decision to become a Nahobino and ascend the throne of creation, but Dazai becomes just goofy. Like he does the Virgil hair thing and starts teleporting around like he's this really cool guy. Yakumo and Nuwa represent the neutral path and have an interesting perspective on the whole matter. You see, because the creator god is dead, a new creator must ascend the throne and become a god. But only humans who are merged with demons, otherwise known as Nahobino, are allowed to do so. Yakumo lost his family to demons, and as such has vowed to destroy the throne no matter what. Nuwa, being the mother of humanity, has taken a liking to Yakumo and joins him. However, it quickly becomes clear that Yakumo believes in something of a might makes right mentality when it comes to humanity, and as such has an extremely skewed view of the world. If you choose to destroy the throne, the game makes it very clear that while you might have technically chosen the neutral route, you've basically caused total chaos in the world. However, if you do an oddly chosen selection of side quests, you actually receive one more option. That is to create a world for humanity alone, which serves as the game's secret ending, also known as True Neutral. Lucifer serves as the game's true final boss in the Law, Chaos, and True Neutral endings, while the neutral ending gets no Lucifer fight for reasons? I've never really understood why. Lucifer explains that the world, no matter what, will always be recreated in a vicious cycle by the so-called mandala system, and that his goal is for the player to break the world out of this cycle. However, in the True Neutral ending, it is strongly implied that this cycle continues. Overall, the narrative is severely lacking. SMT5, while having extremely interesting lore and ideas, fails to capitalize on these elements while also failing to tell a compelling narrative on a base level. Some of the side quests are interesting, especially the Shiva and Khonsu side quests, but the main narrative itself lacks any real weight. Combat in Atlus JRPGs ranges from good to excellent most of the time. I'd argue that the battle system that feels the least baked of the ones I've played is the Persona 4 combat system, but this isn't a Persona 4 video. SMT5 employs some really cool techniques to make the combat not only fun in a strategic sense, but also flow in a way most RPGs fail to accomplish. The biggest example is the tried and true press turn system. It's Pokemon complete with type affinities, but when you either critical hit or hit the enemy's weakness, you get an extra turn. You also get this if you swap demons or pass your turn, which opens up a lot of strategies. However, the enemy can do the same to you, so be careful. You can also block your opponent's moves, allowing you to make their turns go down faster than if they all just attack normally. Atlus is the king of making a turn-based game feel interactive. Every choice is crucial, battles can be over because of one small mistake, and the menus feel responsive. Another part of this is that the level scaling makes it possible to beat a boss even if it's 5 levels above you normally, so the grind is almost non-existent unless you want to do the super bosses, allowing the levels to mark progress more than simply being a number. Another thing I deeply appreciate is how powerful the Nahobino feels. I love unlocking his skills over the course of a playthrough, and I especially appreciate how he isn't type locked like a lot of other RPG protagonists. You can switch his affinities and change his affinities, while also changing his spot in the party order to better accommodate a certain playstyle. Personally, I love going for a strength build Nahobino, and the best spot for him is going either second or fourth, so the support demons can buff and debuff as they need. I'm a sucker for games with systems that fold into each other, and SMT5 has that in spades. The combat folds into levels that you need to obtain new demons. New demons allow you to fuse new demons who can then help gain experience. The exploration also furthers this by offering ways to obtain skills without necessarily having a particular demon fuse. One thing I will say is that this game is pretty easy to break in half. If you know what skills to look for, you can easily start killing major bosses in less than one turn on normal, so I encourage going in blind on your first playthrough. Overall, SMT5 is my favorite Atlus RPG from a gameplay perspective because it really is just that good. The level and combat design, the atmosphere, everything is just amazing. While the story is disappointing, it does do its job, and the finale presents enough interesting concepts to be worth the journey. Would highly recommend to a fan of JRPGs and any Atlus fan, even one who has only ever played Persona 5. I promise you'll enjoy it.